Hi, this is Joe Ziemba, the host of When Football Was Football here on the Sports History Network. Aside from my podcasting duties, I'm also a sports collector. And as such, I'm very pleased to share the exciting news that the Sports History Network has partnered with Rochester Sports Autographs, the largest JSA authenticated autograph distributor in the United States, where you can get deals on over 30,000 autographed sports collectibles. So as a collector, I was very pleased when I visited the site of Rochester Sports Autographs. The massive inventory is easy to search, carefully documented, and visually appealing. The options seem limitless, whether you're looking for an autographed baseball, signed football helmets, or basketball jerseys, among thousands of others. I found everything from a Babe Ruth autograph, a signed football by Dick Butkus, and an autographed Larry Bird basketball jersey. And as a collector, you'll be delighted with the very competitive pricing on JSA authenticated products. Made possible since RSA deals directly with athletes, so there's no extra markup, and the savings are passed on directly to the customer. Perhaps you're looking for an early gift for Mother's Day or Father's Day. Heck, who needs a holiday as an excuse to give a piece of sports history to your loved ones? Or how about yourself? Today seems like a great day to add to your own sports collection, right? RSA even has film, music, and other entertainment autographs on the site, so there's something for everyone. All orders from Rochester Sports Autographs are top quality and shipped to your door with top authentication and a money-back guarantee. And to make sure RSA knows that the Sports History Network sent you, we created a special link for you. All you need to do is head to shoprsa.com/SHN. That's shoprsa.com/SHN to get your own piece of sports history today.
The National Basketball Association has some of the greatest athletes in the world that have played in it, some of the greatest moments in sports history. And we have an author that's wrote a book called NBA 75, The Definitive History. Dave Zarum is his name, and he joins us in a moment to talk about the greatest 75 players and moments in NBA history. Coming up in just a moment. Hi, my name's Darren Hayes, and I know you've heard me on the Pigskin Dispatch talking about football history for years. Well, now I'm on a new mission, a quest to find sports history in other sports as well as football by learning through the jerseys and the apparel and the gear that the players wore and the franchises supplied their teams. It's an educational trip, and I'm taking you with me day by day, player by player, uniform by uniform. The Sports Jersey Dispatch.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my sports history friends. This is Darren Hayes of the Sports Jersey Dispatch podcast. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to all things great in sports history, and welcome to another episode of our Sports Jersey Dispatch podcast. We're going to talk about some great basketball history today, in particular the NBA history, and a little bit before that, we have an author that's wrote a book recently called NBA 75, The Definitive History. His name is Dave Zarum, and he goes through Firefly Books, the publishing company, and they were nice enough to send us a copy of the book. We read it, really loved it, and glad to have Dave on today. Dave Zarum, welcome to the Pig Pen.
Hey, great to be here.
Dave, exciting book. We'll get to it in a little bit. Really excited after reading this. You really got me pumped up about the NBA season again. I was already excited watching it, and re-energized me here a little bit. But I guess before we get started, you have an interesting background, and maybe you could share that, especially your interest in basketball and your connection to basketball to make you write a book about it.
Sure, yeah, by all means. Well, I grew up a huge sports fan, like a lot of kids, and a huge basketball fan. Particularly at some point, I was really always drawn to the history of the game. Any documentary that came by, any little video I can grab from a bin in a video store, those compilation videos, like anything I can get my hands on about the history of the game. I just always gravitated towards that. And, fortunate enough, I was able to be part of the launch of a publication called Sportsnet Magazine, kind of like a Sports Illustrated in Canada. This is about halfway through the 2000s. And from there I was able to get the opportunity to cover the game up close. So I covered the Toronto Raptors mostly for years, and and the NBA as a whole for sports now, which is kind of like almost like an ESPN kind of a national sports broadcaster up here in Canada, here in Toronto, Canada. So yeah, so just covering the Raptors, I was able to kind of as much as I was covering the day to day, I was still always drawn to the history of the game. Anytime I had a chance to speak to a coach or a former player, I wasn't really asking about like the game that night. I was always asking about stories from back in the day because that's all I really was interested in. So when the opportunity came by to write this book, NBA 75, it was yeah, I jumped at it to say the least. Firefly, who you mentioned earlier, they had put out a similar book about the NHL called NHL 100, marking the 100th anniversary, and we're going to do a similar project to mark the NBA's 75th anniversary a couple years back. And this was the result of that. It's 75 stories across 75 years of NBA history. And what's cool about it too is we were able to update it. There's a new version of it, so we were able to put stuff like the bubble. As the history of the game keeps evolving, we were able to include some of that in the book, like the bubble. Able to go and add chapters about Giannis and the global superstars that took over the game. So it's almost like this kind of evolving project, just like the league itself.
I really enjoyed the way you started off with, especially talking about Jerry West, the guy that's on the
right,
emblem of the NBA,
the logo.
And yeah, the logo. And you had a sort of a little bit of a personal connection, it sounded like, with him that you wrote in a book. You got to talk to him.
Well, yeah, it was really cool. Like I mentioned, like a great part of covering the game was being able to speak to these legends and be up close and personal with a lot of these kind of icons of the game. Um, and Jerry West. I mean, he's right at the top amongst them for countless reasons. Like you mentioned, he's the logo. He's a former MVP. He's just an absolute titan when it comes to the history of the game. And I was really fascinated by Jerry West long before I ever had the chance to speak to him. His story itself is really powerful. Essentially, he was we remember him as one of these these iconic players, one of the greatest of all time. But to him, he lived a tormented life in basketball. He made it to countless finals and lost every single one of them. He captured it eventually in '71 with the Lakers, but it took years and years and years and years and years of losing that they really played a toll on him. So I always found his relationship to the game really fascinating. Anyways, fast forward to somewhere around, I don't know, 2012. I was assigned something for the publication I was working for, some sort of story that required reach out to Jerry West, see if you can get an interview. So I did. He was with the Golden State Warriors at the time as an advisor. He played a huge front office role for a lot of teams in the NBA since he retired, like with the Lakers. Jerry West is the guy who is considered the architect of the Shaq and Kobe Lakers. He played a huge role in putting those Steph Curry Warrior teams together. So this guy who, long after he retired, was still making his mark on winning basketball. Anyways, put in a request to talk to him. How these things go. It's really hit or miss when you're going through like official team channels and whatnot. And I kind of, nothing came of it. I sort of forgot about it. A couple months later, I'm just about to leave my office. It's a Friday. Friday afternoon. Phone rings. It's like 4:30 p.m. on a Friday. I'm kind of just like itching to get out of there. Phone rings and it's, "Hi Dave, this is Jerry West." I just sort of like had to do a double take. I was like, "Oh, hey,
pick your jaw up off the floor a little bit."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's like, "Is this a prank call?" And I couldn't remember for the life of me what the initial interview was supposed to be about. Like my initial seeking to speak to Wes. I forget what the assignment was all about. And I ended up just asking him things I was curious about over the course of his career. I wanted to know about his relationship with Elgin Baylor. I wanted to know about playing with Wilt, what Wilt Chamberlain was like in person. I wanted to know about kind of the dynamic between his Lakers teams and the Bill Russell Celtics teams. I wanted to know about like his upbringing and how he became so kind of like maniacally, almost like to the point where it was sad, obsessed with the game of basketball. And like to my delight, I mean, the guy he was a complete open book. And it was like an hour later, he's just sharing all these stories, going really, really in depth on everything. And it's sort of all it did is reinforce to me like how like important it is to preserve these stories and to make sure they're documented somewhere where people can find them. And also just like I also remember thinking, I'm speaking of one guy, and there's dozens, hundreds of characters, people just like him across the history of the league, and they all have their own stories and how rich this kind of pool of history was for the NBA. So it was a real pivotal moment, certainly when it comes to something like this book.
Yeah, it's I'm glad you mentioned that, because I sort of, when I first got the book, I'm looking at the title NBA 75. I'm like, okay, talk about the 75 best players in the NBA, or maybe 75 years of high events of it. I wasn't sure where you're going to go looking at the
Mm-hmm.
book, but I was pleasantly surprised you sort of went both ways. And I mean, I enjoyed it. I think it was right there in the beginning too, maybe in the Jerry West piece, or maybe before that, talking about the years before the merger and how the league was developed and the grassroots of it. And I found that extremely interesting too. I was glad you put that in there.
Yeah, it was really cool to trace the roots of the game back all the way to the beginning, and to see how the league evolved. That was one thing I was definitely really conscious of. We're in essence, like, the exercise is telling like 75 individual stories, but it was really important to me that there was some sort of through line between them all. And I think that through line is just the way that not only the game evolved, but like the characters and the people who shaped the league, how their role in society evolved. The NBA in its early days went from very like utilitarian, blue collar. These guys worked summer jobs and whatnot, and they didn't have like basic workers' rights. Like blatant racism and prejudice, well documented really across the history of the NBA. Which is another through line I wanted to make sure was clear, was that this is a league that has really been at the face of kind of social justice and the human rights conversation since the beginning. But as well, the evolution of it and the way these guys went from nothing to something, these billion-dollar enterprises essentially, and how that played out over the course of the last 75 years.
Yeah, it really was. It was really a snapshot in North American history too. Like you said, you went through civil rights and everything, especially
Mm-hmm.
the Bob Cousy story, and then you brought him into the Bill Russell story, and sort of
Right.
how that was navigated through. Cousy. I think you had the one spot where Russell wasn't allowed to eat dinner with the team in a particular city, and Cousy ended up taking a meal back to his room and eating it with them. There's just some great little
So many
pieces.
stories like that. Yeah, so many
Yeah,
stories like that.
extremely interesting. I really found that great, and I didn't get a chance to watch Bill Russell play much. I was a little young when he played, but really enjoyed the story of it. And especially I knew him as a broadcaster and everything, knew a little bit of the legacy. But I thank you for that too. And I was most interested because I saw the cover. You have 5 players on there. You have Kobe, you have Bird, you have MJ, LeBron, and Magic. And 3 of those are from what I think is just like the most magical time in NBA history. I think those mid to late 80s teams. And you talk quite a bit about that. And I was really excited about that, especially, the Dream Team and the Celtics Lakers matchups,
Right.
those eras. And, so maybe.
Well, that's when the game became the game in a lot of ways. As far as we know it today, the league going from basketball being somewhat niche, definitely not a predominant sport. As great as people like Bill Russell were, Will Chamberlain, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, like these Oscar Robertson, these incredible figures. The NBA basketball was never a massive industry, so to speak. While they were playing, and it's really Magic and Bird. That's when you saw that change really happen. Magic Johnson arrives in the NBA 1980, like right after the infamous Seattle Supersonics Washington Bullets finals that were shown on tape delay. Like, that's how little the kind of greater American public cared about NBA basketball. And then Magic and Larry come along. This rivalry that had existed, in college for a little bit, transfers over into the NBA. They start, facing each other in the finals year after year. It was just something for the public to kind of glom onto, and the NBA, to their credit, especially under David Stern, did a great job of marketing that and taking advantage of that. I always love the analogy that Stern apparently used to like to use in terms of the way he marketed the league, is that it was kind of like a Walt Disney operation. Michael Jordan was Mickey Mouse, and Magic was Goofy, and so on and so forth. But I also really hope that it came across in the book that that as much as Magic and Larry really helped change the tide of NBA basketball and grow the game in huge ways, when Michael Jordan came along, and when he was entering his prime, when he started doing his thing, I mean, it just took the whole operation to a complete another stratosphere. So I mean, they're in the same era and they're peers, and they're always like grouped together for good reason. But I always hope to make a distinction that even among that class, Michael was kind of leaps and bounds above.
Yeah, you sort of saddened my heart, and I had a what if moment. I'm live in Pennsylvania, so the only team in Pennsylvania is 76ers. So I've been a 76ers fan all my life, and I'm sitting there reading that part. Dr. J, who I loved watching as a player.
Oh my God, Dr. J, coolest guy on the face of the earth, still to this day. I'll tell you my meeting Dr. J story after. Sorry.
Okay. But you had that with the MJ getting drafted, and I think you put a little blurb in there, which I didn't know, that the 76ers offered to trade Dr. J for the third pick to try to get Michael Jordan. I'm sitting there thinking, God, the what if could have happened there. As sad as I would have been seeing Dr. J leave, knowing what I know now about Michael Jordan, oh my God,
Oh man, yeah, bitter pill, but
Berkeley,
yeah. Sometimes medicine doesn't taste good. Yeah, that would have been something.
So, okay. Yeah, please tell us about Dr. J. I love your Dr. J.
Oh, right. Okay, so Philly guys, sorry to have to do this to you, but I was at a Joe Carter charity event. Joe Carter up here in Toronto, hero for what happened in ’93. Again, like I said, I hate to have to bring it up, but I feel obliged to. So Joe Carter, Toronto sports hero, he holds this annual charity event up at the former Sky Dome here, and I used to cover it every now and then. And I was there one year, and there's huge stars there. It's like Bo Jackson's there, like Kenny Lofton, maybe Barry Sanders. I remember Jonathan Ogden specifically, and it was just like a bunch of big names in sports. And then Dr. J walks through the door. He's like by himself. He's like got a little backpack on, and I swear the entire room just froze. Every head turned towards him. Everybody, even in this room full of stars, like Dr. J walked in the door, and he saw all these sports legends. They'd all just turn into kids again, and it was so cool to see. I remember everyone was frozen, and I saw everyone like kind of stuck, and I just like went up to him, and I was like, "Hey!" And we ended up having a huge chat. We talked about the ABA for about like 15 minutes at this random Joe Carter event, and then I was there again the next year. Same thing. He returned, and we just kind of picked up the conversation, and yeah, my impression was just like this guy is the epitome of cool still to this day. He must have been 65 or something like that. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, there's an interesting story about him here. I live in Erie, Pennsylvania, and we have a couple Division II colleges here in the area, and one of them is Gannon University. And they've had some good teams over the years, and they played the University of Massachusetts. I guess University of Massachusetts came to play a Christmas tournament or something here, and Dr. J was on the team. And back in those days, the warm-ups, people just did layups.
Right,
well, Dr. J would come out and leap from the foul line, I guess, and
the whole routine.
Yeah. That was his layup move, and everybody was in awe, like, oh my God, who is this guy? The big fro and everything he had back in the day before the ABA. But very interesting guy and fun to.
So cool, yeah, exactly. And I'm sure that everyone who saw that they won't forget that. And so he had that impact. You can imagine every game he played, every warm up line he was ever in, people would go home and they tell their kids about it.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. But you talk about more of those guys besides MJ. You talk about really going into some great detail on almost the whole dream team of that thing. The piece you had on Olajuwon. I mean, it was probably one of the longer pieces you had in the book, but it was so fascinating. I was captivated by it because, like I said, I'm a 76ers fan, but by that time, when Houston was on the rise at that time, and I loved watching, Phi Slamma Jamma and March Madness. And, I thought that was great. I was, especially against, they played NC Wolfpack, I think, and lost that year on that last second shot. But, Drexler and all them, it was fun to watch. But, Robert Horry and Olajuwon, and and you just wanted to see him. Being a 76ers fan, I didn't want the Lakers or the Celtics to be, it was fun to see somebody else rise up.
Right.
And and the Bulls were settled down a little bit when MJ was out. But your piece on Olajuwon, I never realized that Moses Malone had been such an influential person in his life of basketball.
Yeah, really kind of took him under his wing in a very like in a legitimate way, and kind of molded him into the player he became in a lot of ways. I think the Hakeem chapter might have been the longest one. Yeah, that's a good eye. But I think what I really wanted to get across there was just how good he was. I mean, I was born in the '80s. I'm a sort of, I guess, a child of the '90s. So when he was in his prime with those Rockets teams, that was, I was a kid kind of fascinated by it all, and he was definitely one of the giants of the game at the time. Uh, and yeah, he just has a really interesting history, being and it was, now that I think about it, his story is kind of what we see being replicated. We see it; it's a lot more common today. You think of someone like Joel Embiid or even like Jokic, like a lot of these European players, the players coming from Africa, Pascal Siakam, where basketball is not their first sport, where they're pretty late to the game in a lot of cases, but have all these like transferable skills from other sports on top of obviously like crazy uh, athletic ability and work ethic and all the things that it takes to make it. But he was sort of the mold for a lot of the stars we're saying today. Giannis Antetokounmpo. Really, you can trace it a lot of it right back to the Dream.
Yeah, I never realized, maybe I just forgot or wasn't paying attention back when he was coming up. I mean, they told his story, coming from the African country he came from, picking up a basketball for the first time at like 15 or 16, whatever it was, and becoming such a stud, and growing into a body late too. I think he had a late maturity growth. But I never realized until reading what you had in there, the work that the man put in, with Malone and practicing his footwork, even when he was an NBA veteran, just constantly honing his craft and really made him the great player that he was.
Yeah, he was one of those obsessive guys, about his craft and being the best of what he did. And I remember, well after retirement, those videos would come out where in the summers players would go and train with him, and they'd go to kind of Hakeem camp, and he'd go do one-on-one training with LeBron, Kobe, Dwight Howard in his prime. So it's always cool to see. Yes, it's cool to see these legends kind of continue to impact the game even after their playing days are over.
Yeah, I think you even reference it, what Malone did for him when he was a youngster. He was sort of paying it forward by
Right,
doing these
exactly.
guys. And then when you drop the names, LeBron and Dwight Howard and Kobe, I'm like, oh my God, these are the superstars of the next generation from doing that. So that was great stuff too. I really like that. I also really loved reliving those Lakers Celtics things. Like I said, I had no dog in a fight watching those, and actually
Those two,
I disliked both of those franchises, but they were just so great, and they didn't like each other, and they had such superstars on it. They were fun to watch. And you have, I believe, three different series, all three NBA finals in the '80s that you cover pretty extensively on there.
Yeah, what's interesting is there's Lakers versus Celtics, this rivalry, it appears all throughout the book. The book runs chronologically, and so there's all these different iterations of Lakers Celtics, and somehow these two teams kept meeting each other in the finals, and kept kind of running into each other with history on the line. It begins with those kind of Jerry West, Elgin Baylor teams against the Russells, his Celtics dynasty, where Boston won every time virtually. And then from there, I mean, yeah, we were talking about Magic and Larry, and the fact that those two players, not only were they great, but they met in the finals. I think that's really significant.
Yeah,
Hold on one second. Can you still hear me?
yeah,
Okay. Sorry, some weird pop sound just happened here. Okay, I'm gonna continue from where I was just talking.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and when you have Magic and Larry meeting the finals, it really brought the game to a whole nother level, like we were talking about earlier. And when you keep facing a team year after year after year, I mean, that's how you build a rivalry. And what's neat was they were able to, even though the Celtics dominated at first, the Lakers eventually were able to get their revenge, and that rivalry was balanced out a little bit more. And then when you fast forward, I mean, with the Kevin Garnett Celtics and Kobe's Lakers, I mean, that rivalry was renewed, and they faced each other a couple more times, and it's just always wild for me to see the same teams keep reappearing generations later, and just to think of the number of, you mentioned what ifs, like the number of things that have to fall into place in order for history to keep repeating itself in that way. I don't think we're going to see it this year, needless to say, or maybe anytime soon. But who knows what the future has in store.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you just made me remember back, I think it was the rookie year for both Bird and Magic. And you're talking about, how Stern and company were building up the promotional thing. And I can remember the advertisements before the game, because it's NFL season. We're watching NFL games, and I think their first meeting, and they were promoting a game that was happening like Saturday night or something. And I can remember the announcer saying, can Magic pull a bird out of his hat, or something corny like that, to do it. And
Nice.
it just resonates. I mean, I can still hear that promo, but it got me to watch a game I probably wouldn't have watched otherwise.
Exactly. And that's really honestly like on the court, they were incredible. Magic, a 6'9" point guard who was doing these crazy flashy passes, running the fast break on the Showtime Lakers, in moving at this kind of breakneck speed that the league hadn't seen in a little while. And then Larry Bird, this kind of like killer. This guy who can hit shots from anywhere, talk trash with the best of them. Kind of could do anything and back it up. It's just really like kind of unique, one of a kind character. They were just amazing to watch, but as incredible as they were to watch, their significance was even greater off the court. Like you're saying, like they drew you in to watch games, and I'm sure you're not alone. It's it can't be overstated how different things were after those two came along.
Yeah, that definitely for sure. Just going back into some of the dream team players, talked about Elijah one a little bit, talked about Jordan, Barkley, you had, Clyde Drexler in that era, drawing a blank here now, but we had,
like Stockton and Malone were on those teams.
That's right, Stockton, Malone.
Yeah, Stockton and Malone were on that team. I mean, it was just absolutely stacked. And that was the point, in '88, USA lost, or they won bronze in the Olympics, but it was a huge disappointment. And that was when there were still amateurs playing the Olympics, so the US was sending college players, and really didn't want to get embarrassed again. So also introducing the dream team and this unstoppable kind of basketball force. But that was absolutely star-studded. We talk about Michael Jordan and his kind of ascension throughout the book. And when I think of the dream team, I still think it's another example of kind of Jordan's dominance. The dynamics within the team itself, entering the summer of '92, it was Magic Johnson's league. Magic was still the kind of the king, and Larry was right there along with him. Although Larry had started to really have back issues, so Bird was starting to be, he was a lot less effective on the court, but still obviously a huge figure in the league. And then internally, over the course of that Olympic tournament, it actually probably happened earlier. It probably happened in training camp, or pretty quickly, in the first few practices on that team. Became really clear that Jordan was the man now. Like the Magic and Larry days were amazing for the game, but they're over, and there's a new king in town, and his name is Michael Jordan. And that summer, that team and that tournament is when that transfer happened. So there's just so much going on when it comes to the dream team. When you look at it from a historical perspective, that chapter was so much fun to write.
Yeah. One thing that was really interesting, another thing that I learned is I didn't realize. I think the dream team, or the college stars that were going to be playing in the Olympics that year, Jordan being one of them, ended up playing some exhibition games against NBA all-star teams. And you have a segment where, Jordan's playing against, I think, Bird and a couple other people that we just talked about. And they really didn't like him because they thought he was showing off. And, the college stars end up beating the NBA stars.
Exactly. Yeah. I think within as their egos exist. And so maybe it was hard for someone like Magic Johnson or even Larry Bird to admit it. But I think the signs were there really early on when it came to Michael that, this was a different dude.
Yeah, I never remember having a hatred of Michael Jordan by anybody. Everybody loved him because he was, even in college, even at North Carolina, and everybody just loved him. And he was just a piece of the puzzle there. He wasn't, in Dean Smith's offense like you describe. He was just
right.
One of the team players. It was all team, and he never really got to have his star shine like it probably could have as a collegian. But I never realized that the NBA players sort of had an animosity and a little jealousy rivalry with him right out of the gate before he even played a game in the NBA. I thought
Yeah,
that was,
he definitely arrived with a ton of confidence in himself, and you know how that is. That can rub people the wrong way.
yeah, most definitely. And I think later on you allude to when he's playing in the NBA season, I think one of his first playoff runs with the Bulls, he ends up taking, somebody gives him a shot. I think you had Bird pushing him or something like that. And he gets, PO'd a little bit and just goes off on him for like 60 some points. And
It didn't take much. Like the thing with Michael Jordan famously is that he actively sought motivation and reasons to kind of like take his game to another level, and sometimes it got incredibly petty. And that was what drove his greatness, and it makes him like really, in all honesty, like in a lot of ways an unlikable character. He's almost like a degenerate winner. Like he was just like by any means necessary. Um, trying to find rivalries where they maybe didn't exist, and just doing whatever it took to kind of drive himself, to push himself, and win at all costs. He was not regarded as like a great teammate in terms of like the way he treated those around him and whatnot. But you have to respect what he did on the court. You have to respect how successful he was, and how he went about the game, and just how awe-inspiring his game was. I mean, there's so many great players in the league, but I still don't think we've really seen anyone like him since.
no,
But maybe
I
we will.
I agree. We've come close, with the Kobe's and LeBrons, but there's just something special about Michael. He just he could turn it on and off whenever he wanted to, and mostly on. But
Yeah, I never really fully understood like I was really covering the NBA a lot when there's a day to day when there's a ton of LeBron versus MJ, who's the greatest debates. And this is not a detraction on LeBron James whatsoever, but I never understood what the debate was. I never understood why, how that conversation was, besides statistics. Like, I didn't understand where the debate was there.
yeah, I almost think, I'm not too far away from Cleveland. And, of course, when LeBron first came out and was with the Cavaliers, it was, in our local paper
Incredible.
100 miles away, it was LeBron Watch. They had a segment in the newspaper in our paper 100 miles away. And I think that whole thing with him leaving Cleveland the first time sort of tainted his legacy a bit, even
It
though
didn't help.
player, it just he didn't have the same magic that a guy like Magic
Yeah.
or Michael Jordan had. And I think I took some luster off the diamond a little bit.
That is interesting. And you wonder how not to go off the trails, but you wonder how much, today's the player empowerment era, as we call it, what kind of effect that will have on the way these guys are remembered historically. Because it is somewhat, it's understandable, but it's like not quite as endearing when Kevin Durant goes from team to team to team in search of a title. I mean, obviously there's nothing wrong with that, but there is something more rewarding in a sense when you have these older players who just were on one team for the most part in their careers, which we
Right?
might
Yeah.
not see that for a long time. I don't know.
It might not. I don't remember Michael Jordan wearing the Washington uniforms. I picture the Bulls across his chest. That's a
Right, exactly.
23. So that definitely iconic. Now, one thing I found great is your honesty in the book, where okay, we've talked about all these high points and these great legends and their championships and great accolades, but you also talk about some of the low points in NBA history. The Len Bias story. What a sad and tragic story that was. You talk about people like the career of Sam Bowie and
Hmm.
sort of his trajectory, how his career got off to a bad start. And I appreciate the honesty and the candidness of, because that's part of the history of the game, and it really flowed well with your whole story.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I'm not a I don't work PR for the league, and the goal of this book isn't to show how amazing the NBA is. I love the sport, and I think the game is incredible, and the league has done some amazing things. But there have been lows, and we're talking about documenting the history of this league and what it's meant to sports and to kind of culture on a whole. And so it would be almost like irresponsible to ignore those things. Plus like my main focus is just interesting stories and compelling storytelling. And in a lot of cases, like the more interesting stories are the ones that are don't have a happy ending. And yeah, you mentioned a handful of them in the book, and I think it's important to share those.
Yeah, definitely, and I'm glad you did, because they are definitely part of that story. Now, Dave, why don't we take this time? Let's give the title of your book and where folks can find it to buy a copy of it.
Sure, yeah, it's called NBA 75, The Definitive History. If you search NBA 75, a bunch of stuff will come up because that was the name of the NBA's campaign. But one of them will be this book. So you just search it out. You can find it on Amazon. That's probably the best route to go, although it's in a ton of brick and mortar bookstores around the country as well, if you still go to those.
Yeah, definitely. And folks, if you're driving or at the gym and don't have a pen and paper, we will have a link to Dave Zarum's book, NBA 75, in the show notes of this podcast and on jerseydispatch.com for the accompanying blog post that we'll put on that as well. So, Dave, would you have any social media or anything you'd like to share with us?
I'm not a huge social media guy. If you follow me, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Dave Zarum, Zarum. You'll mostly just see me promoting the book and sharing pictures of people who are promoting the book and whatnot. So not the most compelling follow, but the best thing you can do is check out the book itself. I'm really proud of how it turned out, and I really appreciate you having me on. This has been great. Always happy to chat hoops history.
Yeah, I'm very thankful you were able to come on, and I thank you for sharing this book with us and sharing your stories that you have in it and spending the time today to talk about it. So, Dave Zarum, NBA 75, a copy of this book. We'll have the links on there. Thank you for sharing with us today and coming on the podcast.
Anytime.
We're dribbling around and see the shot clock's almost out, so we got to put up our shot and come back tomorrow for some more great sports history. We invite you to check out our websites, jerseydispatch.com and pigskindispatch.com. Not only see the daily sports history, but to experience the preservation of great events and people that play the games. Find us on Pigskin Dispatch. It's also on social media outlets of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all your daily sports history. Pigskin Dispatch is happy to be associated with the Sports History Network, the sports headquarters of yesteryear, found at sportshistorynetwork.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hi, this is Joe Ziemba, the host of When Football Was Football, here on the Sports History Network. I'm very pleased to announce that I will be partnering with the Sports History Network to give away 2 copies of my latest book called Bears vs. Cardinals, the NFL's Oldest Rivalry. To enter, just head over to the following link, sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways. We hope you'll enjoy the numerous stories in the book, which is largely based on the newly released Dutch Sterneman collection at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Dutch was the co-owner of the early Chicago Bears with George Halas and kept correspondence, financial records, and scouting reports, which now allow us to peek into the management of an NFL club during the first few years of the league's existence. Along the way, we'll meet unusual gridiron characters from years gone by, including a quarterback who could throw the ball farther behind his back than he could throwing it forward, a Bears lineman who was such a good tavern fighter that he decided to enter the boxing universe, and a Cardinals halfback who gave up the NFL rushing title by deciding to not show up for his team's final game of the season. And can we forget the time the Al Capone mob interrupted a Bears-Cardinals game? The new book was fun to research, and I hope you will enter our free contest today. Once the winners are selected, we'll be in touch regarding shipping as well as to inscribe the book personally for you. This might make a perfect gift for Mother's or Father's Day, or simply add it to your own personal collection. Once again, enter by visiting sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways. Thank you and good luck.